Did you know that one of the world's most iconic paintings was inspired by a goddess born from the foam of a mutilated god's remains? Welcome to the intersection of myth, philosophy, and breathtaking art. This is the remarkable story behind the birth of Venus. From ancient mythology to Renaissance brilliance, the birth of Venus is more than a painting. It's a gateway into a timeless tale of beauty, power, and rebirth. To truly understand the depth of Botticelli's masterpiece, we need to begin not in Florence, but in the mists of Greek mythology. The goddess Venus, known as Aphrodite in Greek mythology, wasn't born in any traditional way. Her origin story is as dramatic and poetic as the ideals she represents. According to the ancient Greek poet Hesiod, in his epic Theogony, the story begins with the Titans, the primordial beings that predated the Olympian gods. Uranus, the sky god, and Gaia, the earth, bore many children. But when Uranus began to imprison his offspring within Gaia, she sought help from her son Cronus. In a bold act of rebellion, Cronus attacked his father with a sickle, severing his genitals and casting them into the sea. From the churning foam, Aphros in Greek, rose Aphrodite, fully grown, stunningly beautiful, and destined to become the goddess of love, beauty, desire, and fertility. This myth is not just violent, it's deeply symbolic. It speaks to creation, emerging from chaos, beauty arising from conflict, and the eternal cycle of life and transformation. Aphrodite is not simply a romantic figure. She is the personification of the creative force, of physical allure, of attraction that shapes both gods and mortals alike. Her myth challenged ideas of divinity. Unlike other deities, she was not born of conventional lineage or through divine union. She emerged from nature itself, from sea and sky, primordial elements in harmony and opposition. Over the centuries, the myth of Venus traveled through Roman culture, evolving and absorbing new meanings. The Romans adopted Aphrodite as Venus, and with this change came a shift in emphasis, from primal chaos to refined love and civility. Venus became not only a goddess of physical beauty, but also a symbol of cultured elegance, charm, and political symbolism, even serving as the mythological ancestor of Julius Caesar through Aeneas. In art and literature, she became the muse of poets and the emblem of aesthetic idealism. Now, leap forward over 1,000 years to 15th century Florence, Italy, a hub of creativity, philosophy, and rediscovery. This was the Renaissance, a period of extraordinary intellectual and artistic revival rooted in the values of classical antiquity. The powerful Medici family who ruled Florence were patrons of the arts, and they fostered a cultural explosion that would shape Western civilization. Under their sponsorship, artists weren't just craftsmen, they were intellectuals, visionaries, and storytellers. It was in this rich, complex environment that Alessandro di Mariano di Vanni Filippeppi, known to us as Sandro Botticelli, created his masterpiece, The Birth of Venus, around 1484-1486. While the exact date and purpose of the commission remain a mystery, scholars widely believe that the painting was created for a Medici villa, possibly Villa di Castello, owned by Lorenzo di Pierfrancesco de' Medici. But what makes Botticelli's interpretation of the Venus myth so unique, so enduring, and so different from earlier depictions? Let's take a closer look at the painting itself. It depicts Venus, a nude woman with flowing golden hair, standing on a giant scallop shell as she floats toward the shore. To her left, the wind god Zephyrus flies in from the sea, entwined with a nymph, Chloris, who assists him in blowing Venus to the land. On the right, a Horae, one of the goddesses of the seasons, waits to cloak her in a flowing robe adorned with flowers. The sea sparkles, the trees bend in the breeze. It is a moment suspended between myth and metaphor. The composition is carefully constructed, elegant in its simplicity, and powerfully symbolic. Botticelli wasn't concerned with naturalism in the way Leonardo da Vinci or Michelangelo would be. Instead, he favored grace, rhythm, and line. Venus is not anatomically accurate. Her neck is elongated, her pose is physically impossible, but none of that matters. What Botticelli presents is an ideal, not a reality. Her modest posture, inspired by classical statues like the Venus Pudica, signals not shame but serenity. Her gaze is calm, detached, inward. This is not just a physical figure, this is divine beauty incarnate. The painting draws heavily from the philosophies of Neoplatonism, which was thriving in Florence during Botticelli's time, thanks in large part to the Medici-sponsored Platonic Academy. Neoplatonism taught that beauty, especially physical beauty, could lead the soul towards spiritual enlightenment. In this framework, Venus serves a dual function. She represents both Venus Pandemos, the earthly goddess of physical love, and Venus Urania, the celestial embodiment of spiritual and divine love. This philosophical underpinning changes the viewer's perception. Botticelli's Venus is not meant to be seen through the lens of lust or eroticism. Her nudity is sacred, purified of desire, and meant to reflect the divine beauty of the soul. By contemplating her image, the viewer is invited to ascend mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. The painting is also filled with allegorical details. The roses blown in by Zephyrus are not just for decoration. They symbolize the fleeting nature of love and beauty. The shell, associated with Venus throughout classical tradition, is a symbol of birth, femininity, and perfection. Even the horae's floral cloak is meaningful. She represents spring, the season of rebirth and love. The colors used by Botticelli further enhance the symbolism. The pale blue of the sea, the soft pinks and golds of Venus's skin and hair, the white of the shell, all evoke a sense of purity and light. The figures are outlined with clear, graceful lines that suggest movement, harmony, and grace, even in their stillness. It's also important to understand what the birth of Venus meant in the cultural and political context of the time. Florence was a city caught between devout Christian faith and a growing interest in classical antiquity. Botticelli's painting reflects this delicate balance. While the subject matter is pagan, its treatment is spiritual. The image can be viewed both as a mythological tableau and a metaphor for Christian purity and divine love. It was a bold, even risky, artistic statement, one that only the Medici's protection and the intellectual climate of the Renaissance could have supported. And yet, for all its fame today, the birth of Venus wasn't always so revered. After the artist's death, Botticelli's style fell out of favor during the High Renaissance, as newer artists embraced realism, perspective, and anatomical accuracy. For centuries, his work was largely forgotten until the 19th century, when art historians and critics rediscovered his genius. Since then, the birth of Venus has become one of the most studied, celebrated, and reproduced artworks in history. Today, the birth of Venus hangs in the Uffizi gallery in Florence, where it draws millions of visitors every year. For those who stand before it, the effect is often described as awe-inspiring. There's a strange magic in seeing such a familiar image in its original scale and color, surrounded by the very city where it was born. You're not just looking at a painting, you're witnessing a moment of Renaissance thought, mythological imagination, and artistic transcendence. In many ways, the birth of Venus is the Renaissance in a single frame. The rebirth of classical myth, the elevation of beauty, the marriage of philosophy and art. It asks us to look, not just with our eyes, but with our minds and hearts. And in doing so, it continues to inspire wonder, reflection, and endless reinterpretation, even more than 5 centuries after its creation. Botticelli's The Birth of Venus may have been painted in the 1480s, but its resonance has traveled far beyond the walls of Renaissance Florence. Over the centuries, the painting has taken on new meanings for different generations. From romantic poets to modern feminists, from fashion designers to digital artists, Botticelli's Venus has remained a muse for the world's creative minds. One of the most compelling aspects of this masterpiece is how it bridges the ancient and the modern. Botticelli didn't just recreate a myth, he reimagined it. He gave Venus a presence that transcends time. She is neither entirely Greek nor fully Christian, neither a mere mortal nor a remote deity. She exists in a liminal space between the divine and the human, and in that space we find endless room for interpretation. Take, for example, how the painting has been interpreted in modern psychology. Some scholars see Venus as a Jungian archetype, the anima or the idealized feminine image within the male unconscious. Her calm, poised demeanor and otherworldly beauty symbolize inner harmony, emotional depth, and creative potential. Others view her through a feminist lens, both a product of male fantasy and an image of empowered femininity that has inspired women to reclaim classical beauty as their own. In the realm of popular culture, the birth of Venus continues to thrive. The painting has been quoted, parodied, and reinvented in fashion editorials, advertising campaigns, album covers, and films. From Salvador Dali's surreal tributes to Lady Gaga's art pop aesthetic, Venus has become a shorthand for sophistication, transformation, and ethereal allure. In the world of haute couture, her flowing hair and pearlescent skin have inspired countless runway looks and makeup palettes. Even digital artists have embraced her, turning her into GIFs, memes, and AR filters, breathing new life into a 15th century icon with 21st century tools. But perhaps what makes the birth of Venus so captivating is not just its history, symbolism, or artistry, it's how it makes us feel. There is something undeniably arresting about the way Venus looks at us. Her gaze is soft, almost introspective, yet unafraid. She meets our eyes not with arrogance or invitation, but with an openness that suggests she knows something we don't. It's as if she exists not to be looked at, but to make us look inward. For all its mythology and philosophy, the painting ultimately celebrates one profound and universal truth: beauty matters. Not in the superficial sense, but in its power to elevate, to heal, to move. Botticelli reminds us that beauty, true beauty, has the power to transcend time, culture, and language. It connects us to something greater, something eternal. And perhaps that's why this image has endured for over 500 years. Not because it depicts a goddess born from sea foam, but because it reflects our enduring search for meaning, love, and transformation. Whether you are an art historian, a student, a traveler, or simply someone who has glimpsed the painting in a book or on a screen, something about the birth of Venus stays with you. Today, as we stand in a world increasingly driven by speed, distraction, and the artificial, this masterpiece calls us back to something ancient and essential. It asks us to pause, to breathe, to feel, to see beauty, not just in the painting, but in ourselves and the world around us. So the next time you look at Botticelli's Venus, don't just admire her form or her story. Listen to her silence. Let her guide you, as she once guided Renaissance thinkers, toward a deeper understanding of what it means to be human, to create and to love. If you enjoyed this journey through myth and art, hit that like button, subscribe for more stories behind the world's greatest masterpieces, and share this video with someone who loves art as much as you do. Until next time, keep exploring, keep imagining, and never stop seeking the beauty in the world.